Karoline Leavitt took a jab at Jasmine Crockett's education live on air, assuming it would throw her off. What followed completely shifted the room, and the internet couldn't believe it. It's funny how some people think volume equals intellect. That's what Karoline said, barely batting an eye, her voice calm, confident, and cutting. But it was her smirk that landed harder than her words. A smirk not just for Jasmine, but for the cameras, the crowd, and the viral clips that would follow. They were broadcasting live, a Friday night. Segment straight from a studio in Des Moines, Iowa. The topic, education, race, and politics. 3 issues that rarely mix quietly. 5 panelists, 1 moderator, and 2 women who stood on opposite ends of America's current spectrum. Jasmine Crockett didn't react. The room was already tight with tension, but that comment shifted the atmosphere. You could feel it whether you were in the studio or watching from your couch. It was like someone poked the wrong person at the wrong time. Jasmine leaned back slightly, didn't grab the mic, didn't tense up. She just met Karoline's gaze, steady, letting the silence speak first. The moderator sensed the shift, adjusted in his chair, and tried to steer things forward. But Jasmine had more to say. These moments don't appear out of thin air. They're built. They come from history, from quiet tension, from coded comments, whispered behind closed doors. And tonight that coded language was laid bare for everyone to see. There was no dramatic gasp from the audience. They did something worse. They laughed. Not all of them, but enough. It wasn't a loud laugh. It was uneasy, scattered, edged with discomfort. Karoline noticed it. She sat up taller. She liked what she heard. Jasmine didn't move. She knew that laugh. She'd heard it before. Now let's rewind a bit. Let's go back before Jasmine's clapback would take over headlines. It hadn't always been so quiet or heavy. Just half an hour earlier, the set was busy. Lights warming up, microphones being tested, producers giving final cues. Jasmine walked in calm, poised, wearing an emerald blazer and simple jewelry. Confident, clear, and ready to speak on a topic she knew well. Across the studio, Karoline fluffed her curls and murmured to the makeup artist, barely glancing at Jasmine. She didn't need to. Her posture made her intent clear. She came to control, not to converse. This wasn't Jasmine's first live show, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was the room's energy. Maybe it was the producer's setup. 2 women, 1 table, 2 Americas. She had rolled her eyes at that phrase. But she came anyway, because that's what she does. She shows up, especially when it's uncomfortable. Her father always told her, be there even when it's tough. That's when it matters most. So here she was once again, being dismissed for her degree, her intellect, her presence. Karoline's remark wasn't just personal. It was calculated. It aimed to box Jasmine in, not as a representative, not as a legal expert, but as someone who didn't really belong. But what came next was something no one expected. Not Karoline, not the host, not even Jasmine herself. Because when you've spent a lifetime preparing for moments you didn't see coming, they don't surprise you. They reveal your readiness. Back in the green room, the air was too cold. Jasmine wrapped her hands around a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, eyes on the studio monitor. It showed the stage, empty chairs under soft lighting, crew members making final tweaks, adjusting wires, checking sound. She inhaled deeply, quietly. She'd done this, debates, panels, interviews. But this time felt different. Not because the stakes were higher, but because of who she was facing. Karoline Leavitt had made a name for herself through precision and provocation. She knew how to press buttons and smile while doing it. Jasmine had studied her, not out of fear, but to understand the game. You don't walk into a storm pretending it's clear skies. Her outfit was chosen with care. Deep green blazer, crisp white blouse, small gold earrings. Nothing flashy, just enough to say, I'm here to speak, not to argue. She skimmed her notes one last time. Case law, school data, policy bias examples. She probably wouldn't use most of it. What mattered tonight wasn't just her words. It was how she delivered them across that table. One of the producers handed Karoline a mic pack. She didn't look over, but her voice carried. I just hope this doesn't turn into a feeling session, she said with a soft chuckle, loud enough for the room to catch. Jasmine didn't reply, not because she didn't hear it, but because she'd already filed it away, lazy attempt. Instead, she sat near the mirror, pulled out her phone, and opened a message thread with her older brother, Miles. Miles, you got this. Be clear, breathe, she smiled. He always knew when she was overthinking, which she often did. A knock at the door brought her attention back. The stage manager entered, headset on. 5 minutes, folks. Karoline stood right away, fixing her jacket like she was walking a runway. Jasmine stood slower, giving herself one final look in the mirror. Her eyes were sharp but carried a certain tiredness, the kind only familiar to those who've had to prove themselves twice as much. She passed Karoline silently. No greeting, no glance, just walked forward. The hallway to the stage was narrow. You could hear the audience settling in, mostly locals, college students, politics fans, a few journalists. They were told to stay neutral, but audiences always chose sides long before the cameras rolled. At the stage entrance, Karoline leaned in and said quietly, "Don't take it personal tonight. It's just politics." Jasmine replied, "No need to explain the game to me. I just play by different rules." The moderator was already seated. Papers ready, eyes shifting between his notes and the countdown timer. Jasmine took her seat. She sat upright, steady, like the last tree in an open field that had learned not to bend with every gust. The lights dimmed, theme music started, and the red camera light blinked on. They were live. The moderator greeted the viewers, introduced the panel, and outlined the discussion. The intersection of public education and political bias. Karoline smiled like she was posing for a photo. Jasmine adjusted her mic and stayed quiet. She didn't need attention. She just needed space to speak, because often the strongest voice isn't the first to speak. It's the one that holds the room when silence stretches too long. The studio. Lights were stronger than expected, but Jasmine didn't blink. She kept her gaze fixed forward, the lights bouncing off her blazer like a shield. Karoline sat diagonally across, legs crossed, smiling like she was in on a secret no one else knew. The moderator cleared his throat. "Let's begin with a basic question. Are public schools preparing students for real-life success, regardless of background?" Karoline jumped in right away, almost too fast. "Well, anyone paying attention knows public schools, especially in urban areas, are failing. We pour in billions, yet kids still can't read at grade level. And instead of asking, who's accountable, we keep blaming the system. At some point, it's about responsibility, not excuses." Her delivery was smooth, polished. A few people in the audience nodded, but Jasmine noticed the framing already. This wasn't just about schools. It was about shaping a perception. That failure wears a certain zip code, a certain face. Jasmine waited a beat, then leaned slightly toward the mic. "It's interesting how quickly we call something a failure when we haven't seen the barriers. Most of the students I've worked with aren't lacking in ability. They're lacking in access. When systems are built without them in mind, the issue isn't effort. It's structure." The tension rose a bit. Not quite fire, but enough to feel. Karoline smiled again, sharper now. "Sure, but you're a lawyer, right? You made it, so why can't others?" Jasmine tilted her head slightly. "I didn't make it out. I made it through. There's a difference." There was a small but definite shift in the room. A few audience members straightened in their seats. The moderator leaned forward, picking up on the momentum, and turned to another panelist, a former school principal from Arizona. But Karoline wasn't finished. Her hand lifted halfway. "If I could just add something, we're skirting the real issue. The truth is, not all degrees hold equal weight. And when you're making major decisions, people want to be sure you didn't just get in because of a diversity box." There it was, clean, precise, wrapped in the language of fairness. The moderator didn't cut in. Maybe he wasn't sure how, or maybe he wanted to let it unfold. Jasmine breathed slowly. She didn't react, she didn't flinch. She let the words hang in the air like lingering smoke. The crowd shifted, some clearly uneasy. A young woman in the second row stared down at her lap. A man in the back leaned over and whispered to someone nearby. But Jasmine stayed silent. Another panelist tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. "Well, if we're bringing up credentials, maybe it's worth remembering that public trust isn't only earned through degrees, it's also built through action." Jasmine glanced at him briefly, then looked back at Karoline, still quiet. Karoline looked pleased, like she had scored a point. She loosely crossed her arms, eyes flicking to the audience, carrying the confidence of someone used to being praised for pushing limits. The moderator shuffled his notes. "Representative Crockett, any thoughts before we move on?" Jasmine gave a slow nod. She leaned toward the mic, her voice steady, even, but she wasn't going to let the moment pass. Some situations call for being polite. Others require reminding people exactly who they're talking to. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. She didn't rush. Instead, she gently adjusted her mic as if getting ready to report on weather, not respond to a personal jab. "You know, Karoline," she began, voice composed, "there's a big difference between confidence and condescension. One opens the door to dialogue. The other hides behind it." The studio went still. "I graduated magna cum laude from Prairie View A&M, she continued, tone even but unmistakably firm. "Earned my law degree from the University of Houston. Passed the bar on my first try. Handled public defense cases in some of Texas's most underfunded courtrooms. Nothing was handed to me. I earned my place in every room I've walked into." She paused briefly. "And let's be clear," she added. "If you think a school's name defines a person's intellect, then you're not questioning education. You're questioning access." There was a pause, heavy and full. Karoline's smile faltered for a split second. Her mouth opened, then closed. She hadn't expected Jasmine to go there, not with that precision, not without yelling, not without pulling her through the dirt. Jasmine didn't look away. "It's interesting," she said, leaning back just a little, "how some people underestimate you when they fear you'll outwork them." That was it. The sentence landed in the room like quiet thunder. A ripple of gasps moved through the crowd. No shouting, no dramatics. Just one line, heavy as a dropped weight. A college student in the audience began clapping, hesitant at first, then it spread. Some stood. Others sat quietly, taking it in. The moderator, flustered, stepped in. "Okay. Let's keep things respectful, everyone." But nothing disrespectful had been said. Jasmine hadn't attacked anyone. She had responded with honesty. And she did it in a way meant not to harm, but to clarify. Karoline reached for her water. Her hand moved too quickly, almost like she needed to distract from the expression on her face. She still hadn't replied. Another panelist, a soft-spoken economist from St. Louis, cleared his throat. "I have to say that was very well put, Representative." Jasmine turned slightly toward him and gave a small nod. Not to thank, but to acknowledge. She didn't need approval. She knew what she'd said and why. Karoline finally spoke again, though her tone had lost some of its edge. "Well, credentials are one thing, but outcomes are what count." "Agreed," Jasmine responded immediately. "And tonight the outcome is clear. Everyone just saw who earned her seat here." That sparked another round of reaction from the audience, this time louder. The moderator raised a hand. "All right, let's move on to the next topic. But thank you both for, your engagement." Jasmine leaned back in her chair. She didn't look at Karoline again. She didn't have to. The impact wasn't in the words. It was in how clearly they exposed the moment. Because when someone tries to make you smaller and you hold your ground without striking back, that's not just strength. That's control. But the evening wasn't over yet. And the energy from that exchange hadn't left the room. Even as the moderator shifted the conversation toward federal funding gaps and teacher shortages, the atmosphere still circled Jasmine. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't blamed anyone. But in just 30 seconds, she'd communicated more than some manage in an entire career. The moderator cleared his throat again. "Let's shift focus a bit. Representative Crockett, how do you see state governments taking a stronger role in improving public school results?" Jasmine didn't answer right away. She looked around the table, at the moderator, then at the other panelists, and finally, at Karoline, who was now deeply focused on her notes. "When we discuss outcomes," Jasmine began, her tone back to calm and deliberate, "we have to stop acting like everyone's starting line is the same. It matters when you show up and prove why you deserve to be there. A school's name can't do that for you. Only you can." He nodded firmly. hands trembling slightly. Meanwhile, Karoline stood across the room, surrounded by 2 aides and an older man who looked like a donor. They spoke quietly, avoiding eye contact with anyone outside their group. It wasn't anger, it was discomfort, the kind that surfaces when someone wins a moment they weren't expected to. Eventually, the panelists were led to a private lounge for debriefing. Jasmine sat alone on a couch for a moment. The professor from Oregon walked over and took a seat beside her. Not too near, not too far. "I just wanted to say your composure tonight. It wasn't just admirable, it was rare." She met his eyes, not with pride, but with clarity. "I've had to practice it more than you'd think." He nodded. Across the room, the moderator entered, scrolling through his phone. "We're trending already," he said. "Your quote about being underestimated is all over Twitter, Representative." Jasmine shrugged. "That's nothing new." He laughed, a bit uncertain if she was joking. A producer approached with her coat. "Car's ready when you are." Jasmine rose slowly, gathered her notes, and gave a nod to the few people still around. She wasn't soaking in the spotlight. She wasn't riding a high. She was tired, but not from defeat. Tired the way someone feels after staying composed, while being challenged and making it through, still standing. But the ride back to the hotel was still ahead. The quiet, the reflection that comes after the noise fades. The drive to the hotel was silent. Jasmine sat in the back of a black SUV, her blazer folded neatly in her lap. The driver didn't chat, only soft jazz played quietly from the speakers. The kind of music that fades into the background without asking for attention. She gazed out the window at the grid-like streets of Des Moines. Neon lights from closed diners glinted on the glass. A group of teens passed by a gas station, laughing, jackets zipped up against the chill. Jasmine wasn't rehashing what she'd said. She was thinking about her mother. Years earlier, her mom had come home late from the hospital, still in scrubs, and found Jasmine asleep at the kitchen table, head down in a history book, pen still in hand. Instead of waking her, she sat beside her and rested a hand gently on her back. That night, Jasmine didn't hear it, but she'd later be told, "She works harder than anyone notices." That's what tonight felt like. A quiet echo of all the pieces that had built her. The times she walked into rooms where her presence alone raised eyebrows, the passive comments disguised as humor, the lowered expectations wrapped in fake concern. She hadn't planned to give a speech. She didn't intend to take a jab, she just meant to speak honestly. And when Karoline opened the door, she stepped through. She glanced at her phone, dozens of missed messages. From her team, her brothers, even classmates from years ago. Most were screenshots, links, or clips. One stood out. "Miles, they tried it. You handled it. Proud of you." She smiled. When the car stopped at the hotel, the valet opened her door. Jasmine stepped out, stretched her legs, her heels clicking softly on the pavement as she headed into the lobby. A few people turned to look. One man at the bar nodded politely, clearly recognizing her. She walked straight to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. As the doors began to close, a voice called out, "Hold it!" Jasmine reached out to stop the doors. A woman slid in just in time. Mid-50s, kind eyes, a long scarf looped twice around her neck. "I saw you on TV just now," she said. "You were..." "Wow, that was powerful." Jasmine offered a modest smile. "Appreciate it." "No, really," the woman continued, her voice softer now. "My daughter's in law school. She watches all these panels trying to find someone she can relate to. She called me crying after yours. She said, 'Mama, I needed that. I needed to see that. So thank you.'" Jasmine paused. There were words for press, policy, interviews, but not for this kind of moment. "Tell her to keep going," Jasmine finally said, "especially when people try to shrink her. That's when it matters most." The elevator dinged. Jasmine stepped off on her floor, her heart a little fuller than when she left the studio. Back in her room, she didn't turn on the TV or scroll her phone. She sat on the edge of the bed, took off her shoes, and just sat in silence. Not the heavy kind, the earned kind. There was no dramatic music, no moment of victory, just quiet truth. She'd spoken from the place that counted, and people listened, but what stayed with her wasn't the applause. It was the expression on that young woman's face, the student in the crowd, the mom in the elevator. They were why Jasmine had shown up in the first place. 2 days later, Jasmine sat barefoot in her Dallas kitchen, her hair tied back, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. The headlines had started to fade. New clips were now trending, but her inbox was still full. Dozens of emails from teachers, law students, parents, and strangers. Some told their own stories of being overlooked. Others just wrote 2 words: "Thank you." She didn't reply to all of them. She couldn't, but she read every single one. She hadn't meant to become a moment. She'd just spoken honestly, and when truth is spoken clearly and confidently, it can silence the noise around it. That's what happened on that stage. It wasn't about Karoline's comment. It was about how many people had been quietly waiting for someone like Jasmine to answer. Because often, it's not the remark itself that sticks with you, it's how the room responds. The quick laughs, the eyes that look away, the silence that seals around the moment like plastic. It's something you feel more than you hear. And when you're the one being underestimated, you don't just notice it. You carry it with you. But what Jasmine did on that stage wasn't just a response. It was a correction. More importantly, it was a reflection. She shared her story, not as a badge of honor, but as a reminder. You don't need to come from the expected places to make an impact. You don't need to speak their way to be heard. You don't need their titles to earn respect. But respect isn't always handed to you. Sometimes you have to claim it right there in the room, out loud. Jasmine once heard a professor in law school say, "No matter how smart you are, some people will always assume you're starting from nothing." She didn't completely believe it back then, but life taught her otherwise. So when Karoline made that remark, offhanded, sharp, and intentional, it wasn't just aimed at Jasmine's resume. It was a message to anyone watching who didn't fit the standard mold, anyone who had to prove they belonged the moment they walked in. And Jasmine responded, not by raising her voice, not by attacking. She responded with honesty, the kind that's hard to tear apart. By the end of the panel, Karoline's words had faded into the background. What stood out was how Jasmine stayed steady, spoke with clarity, and took back every inch of the space she had earned. That mattered. It mattered to the student alone, in her dorm, wondering if she had what it takes to keep going. It mattered to the teacher, reviewing lesson plans and remembering how often her work had been undervalued. It mattered to the kid who had never seen someone like them shut down a slight without losing their calm. The moment didn't go viral because it was dramatic. It went viral because it was real, and in a world where loud wins too often, clarity takes real courage. But moments move on, headlines shift, and the question becomes, what's next? It's easy to applaud someone for saying what you were too exhausted or too scared to express. It's harder to be the one who speaks. When the time comes, Jasmine didn't step onto that panel to be anyone's inspiration. She didn't need to be. She walked in ready, and that was enough. Because being prepared is powerful, so is being present. So is knowing your worth when someone tries to reduce you to a label or downplay your value with a grin. The truth is, there are thousands of Jasmines, women who graduated at the top, but still got asked if they really earned it. Men who landed the role, but were still told to prove themselves. Students told their schools weren't impressive enough, their names too unfamiliar, their backgrounds too plain to be taken seriously. What Jasmine reminded people that night is this: where you're from doesn't decide what you know, and your school doesn't define your potential. Respect doesn't go to the loudest in the room. It goes to the one who can stay grounded while being tested. There was no PR stunt behind her message, no polished media response, just experience, clear thought, and a firm refusal to let someone else decide her value. That can't be memorized. That comes from within. And if there's anything to take away from this, if there's a message to hold on to after the clip ends, after the praise fades, it's this: you don't have to shrink to be acknowledged. You don't have to match someone's tone to get your point across, and you definitely don't need privilege to speak with authority. What you need is to stay rooted in your truth. Let the world say what it wants. Let them laugh. Let them doubt. Let them smirk. Because when your confidence comes from preparation, And your words come from lived truth. No insult can shake you. Jasmine didn't win by fighting. She won by standing firm, and someone out there needed to witness that. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of someone or something you've faced, share it. Send it to someone wondering if they belong in the place they've worked to reach. And if you want more stories where real moments meet real meaning, subscribe to the channel. There's more ahead.